There you go.
I think we're on. Wow. Ask and you shall receive. Good morning. It is Wednesday, October 12th, 2011 at 9:02 a.m. and this meeting of the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority Board is now in session. Ms. Rowe, any public comments?
No public comment.
Item 3, adoption of the minutes for the CRRMA board meeting of August 31st, 2011. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Minutes are approved. Item 4, discussion and action on board resolutions authorizing the executive director to execute the following instruments in substantially the same form as attached as they relate to the development of the Loop 375 Cesar Chavez Border Highway Managed Lanes project. A, an amendment to that amended and restated financial assistance agreement with the Texas Department of Transportation dated April 18th, 2011. B, the project development agreement with the Texas Department of Transportation. And C, amended and restated work authorization number 7 with Atkins North America as the CRRMA's general engineering consultant. Mr. Tejas.
Raymond Tejas, Executive Director. As you know, we've been working on these agreements for some time with TxDOT. And in fact, we're actually extremely close to finalizing them. However, as you'll note, as the chair read into the record, I'm asking for approval from the board to authorize me to execute the agreements in substantially the same form as attached. And the reason why that language is included there is that we're not actually completely done with the negotiation of the actual language within the agreements. The concepts have been agreed to. Conceptually, we are in complete agreement. What remains now is for the lawyers to go back and forth and finalize the language. So what we've done is we've added, we've provided you with TxDOT's last version of the instruments for 4A and 4B, the financial assistance agreement amendment, as well as the project development agreement. And from there, the RMA's attorneys are looking to revise certain provisions to make it specifically to shift some of the liabilities that remain with the RMA currently. So, in other words, what I'm trying to say is, in the end, any revisions that would be made would be to the betterment of the RMA. So, with that being said, I want to talk a little bit about what is before you. As you know, the RMA has executed a financial assistance agreement with the Texas Department of Transportation related to the Cesar Chavez project before. That agreement, the financial assistance agreement, originally provided the $80.25 million in total project costs to the RMA. The original intent was that the RMA would design, implement, construct, and oversee the entire project. However, since then, the RMA and TxDOT have agreed that TxDOT would actually complete the design and the construction, and in the end, the RMA would then likely, if everything falls in line, the RMA would likely then operate and maintain the managed lanes portion of the entire project. As a reminder, and for the benefit of the public, the Cesar Chavez project is actually when you're out there currently, it's approximately a 9-mile segment of Loop 375 from roughly the Zaragoza port of entry over to US 54. What this project is looking to do is essentially rehab the existing 4 lanes, 2 lanes in each direction, push them out slightly, and add 1 managed lane to the inside for the entire 9 miles. So again,
1 managed lane in each direction.
Yes, thank you. So again, TxDOT has completed the design for the entire project, has led the project, and is actually overseeing the construction currently. What we're doing today is we're amending the under 4A, we're amending the financial assistance agreement to revise the structure so that in essence, of the $80.25 million, which has been previously awarded to the RMA keeps $2.4 million for general oversight and for due diligence in terms of the RMA reviewing the managed lanes, making sure that they are financially feasible, and doing all of the required studies to make sure that the RMA is comfortable to manage to operate these managed lanes once the construction is complete. That's the $2.4 million. Included in that, the $2.4 would be the RMA's oversight of the procurement for the tolling equipment for the managed lanes. So that's
Which is key for us, because if we wind up operating it, we want to make sure that we have some input on the front end in terms of the type, design, and keeping it as simple and easy to manage as possible.
absolutely. That was a big sticking point, and that's part of the reason why it's taken us so long to get here. So, yes, ma'am.
I had a question. Do we know where the booths are going to be located?
Well, there are no booths. This is an electronic toll facility, so that means that there will be gantries. We have an idea where the gantries are. There would be 3 gantries, which are essentially like overhead sign bridges, and they have the readers on those gantries, and they would read down for the stickers. If a vehicle didn't have the stickers, then we would take photos of the license plate and see payment through that mechanism. Okay. So again, $2.4 million for due diligence as well as the procurement process related to the tolling equipment. In addition, within the FAA, within this amended financial assistance agreement, is the allocation of now I've just gone blank. I've got it here. $7.5 million, and that $7.5 million is allocated to the RMA for the actual design and implementation construction of the actual tolling equipment. So it's the purchase of the equipment, it's the design of the tolling equipment, it's the implementation, it's all of the services necessary to actually turn those managed lanes into true toll lanes. So
Do we have to exercise final primacy before we do that, or are we doing that under the conditional primacy that we're operating under right now?
Well, one of the issues that's taken us so long to get here is kind of a war of words with TxDOT in terms of what we actually exercise through that primacy resolution. Their take on it is that we have exercised final primacy. However, we've retained a right to rescind that management of the facility at the back end. Either way, the answer to your question is the way that we've structured this is that we will spend the 2.4 doing the due diligence and the procurement. We will spend the 7.5 to actually implement the tolling infrastructure. However, if at any time between now and the opening of the facility, the RMA decides that it doesn't make sense, this project does not make sense for the RMA, we can rescind our primacy at that point.
So we've got some flexibility, and we're mainly concerned about the operational costs, ensuring that the revenue coming in is going to at least cover that. We don't want to be put in some sort of negative position. So we've allowed ourselves some flexibility to continue to study that and understand that, correct?
Absolutely. And in fact, and this kind of leads into item 4B, the project development agreement. One of the items that took so long on the project development agreement was getting TxDOT to agree to a later agreement that is referred to as the operating agreement, and that's the agreement that would ultimately say when the managed lanes are open, TxDOT would be responsible for X, Y, and Z, and the RMA would be responsible for A, B, and C. That's the really important item. And honestly, if we get to a point where the managed lanes are about to open and the RMA does not have a fully executed project operating agreement, my recommendation at that time will be to rescind the primacy, because if we don't have those rights and responsibilities allocated appropriately, then the RMA would be on the hook for any losses, and that's not the position that this RMA.
And it won't affect the managed lanes. The managed lanes will continue to be managed lanes, irregardless of whether we handle them or whether they then are run by TxDOT, except for a provision that I believe Representative Pickett put in that after 15 years, if they're not making money, I think they revert back to free lanes. So it's a rather interesting, convoluted project with a lot of moving parts.
Absolutely. That's absolutely true. So again, 4A, which is the financial assistance agreement, identifies the $80.25 million, carves out of that $2.4 million for the RMA as well as $7.5 million for the RMA. The remainder goes back to TxDOT for their completion of the design and construction of this facility. Then item 4B allocates all of the rights and responsibilities during this construction period, during the design and construction period between the RMA and TxDOT. So that's how these documents work together. So that leads us then into item 4C, which is an amended and restated work authorization number 7. If you recall, when we first executed the financial assistance agreement with TxDOT, which originally provided the $80.25 million for the RMA under the idea that the RMA would be pursuing the design, construction, and everything related to the project, we actually, you all, the board authorized the execution of a work authorization with our general engineering consultant, which would allow the general engineering consultant to pursue all of the services and tasks necessary to actually get the project built. Well, as we've just discussed, there have been a number of significant changes in terms of roles and responsibilities for the development of this project. With the scaling back of the RMA's role, we are also now scaling back the GEC's role on behalf of the RMA. So what you see before you is item 4C is that amended and restated work authorization number 7 to basically scale it back and say, okay, we're only looking at the 2.4 million. This is what we need from the GEC for that 2.4 million. I'll come back to you, excuse me, in time for another work authorization related to the actual procurement and construction of the tolling equipment, the $7.5 million. But for now, what we really need to get moving is the 2.4 million, which is really enumerated under 4C. So subject to your questions, that's in a nutshell how all of these three agreements work. Yes, sir.
Raymond, under 4B, it says that we're going to be reimbursed by TxDOT, right? Those 9.9 mil
Yes.
are reimbursable. Where are we going to get the money to pay the bills and then wait 30 days to get reimbursed?
Well, the structure of the reimbursement is the exact same reimbursement structure that we use for the project development agreement, the regional toll plan, and most instances where we have an agreement with TxDOT. And what that essentially means is the GEC or anybody else that provides services to us will provide us an invoice. We review that invoice. Once we're comfortable with it, we send it off to TxDOT. TxDOT pays us within 30 days of receipt from the RMA.
And would that also apply to hardware vendors? Because at some point, we're actually procuring product.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
And so we would ask for at least net 30 to allow TxDOT to reimburse us.
That's absolutely correct. Yes, sir.
Is the 30-day lockdown? I know that there have been some delays on some other projects. Is that pretty much locked down in terms of reimbursement for us to pay the vendors?
Yes, it's within the contract. Now, whether or not there are some hiccups along the way, that we'll have to work with TxDOT on those.
We can manage that on our end.
Yes, sir.
Raymond, on the $2.4 million, part of that is going to be used to study whether or not we're going to go ahead with managing the toll lanes.
Yes.
And then until we decide that, then the $7.5 million kicks in. Otherwise, that 7.5 is purely for hardware, equipment, software.
Well, actually, what we are proposing is that we would actually move them concurrently, because part of the issue and part of why this has been kind of a problem in delaying this for so long is that the construction is underway for the entire project right now. So we need to have the design and all of the work done related to the tolling equipment fairly soon. Now, TxDOT's concern was if the RMA decides to rescind and chooses not to operate the managed lanes at the back end, they didn't want to be stuck with tolling equipment that they weren't that didn't work with their system. Now, our counter to that was the rules that govern RMAs require our equipment to work well with TxDOT's existing
Interoperable.
Thank you. I went blank on the term. However, they weren't comfortable enough with that. So what we've done is actually added an exhibit to the project development agreement that identifies the specific parameters within which the tolling equipment must fit. So to get back to your question, the answer is the RMA is intending to pursue the development of the actual the tolling equipment and put it in there, with the understanding that TxDOT reviews and approves those agreements before we can do anything anyhow. So they would have signed off on the equipment prior to its being implemented.
So I guess how far down the road would we go before we say, okay, it's a go, or no, we're not going to? What's going to happen to say to us, no, we don't want to manage those lanes? What study are we doing? What are we looking at?
Well, and it's really kind of a strange situation that we find ourselves in. Normally, all of this due diligence would have been done previously, but the RMA never had the funds to complete the studies. So all of the work that was done under the market valuation process, if you remember that, all of that was done based on TxDOT's numbers, and that's why we executed conditional primacy in our minds. The reason why we did that was we didn't have the resources to actually dig into TxDOT's numbers and truly agree, yes, these are actual, and yes, we're comfortable with them. So what we did was we executed conditional primacy, saying if these numbers are correct, we will operate the managed lanes at the back end. So we're doing this a little bit backwards, but that explains why we have conditional.
But that study comes out of the 2.4 million?
Yes, ma'am. So we have our general engineering consultant who, one area of theirs focuses specifically on toll projects and feasibility. So we'll let, once we sign this work authorization, amended work authorization 7, we'll ask them to go and evaluate the numbers that we've been using to date and actually develop new numbers to make sure that we can make this work. And part of that evaluation will actually look at if the RMA, by way of example, if the RMA shifts maintenance responsibilities over to TxDOT, does that make it feasible? Or if TxDOT shifts something over to us, are we still able to make the project work? So all of that, kind of the puzzle making of it, will be done in this due diligence period, and that's what the 2.4 really is for.
About that, Raymond, I was over at the Border Highway the other day, and I kind of drove all the way down and back up, and they're moving, I think, from east to west. I think is that because I see the progress of the, towards the east, they're barely lifting the asphalt, and over there they're already laying the groundwork for the concrete and all that. Is it going to be possible to find out whether we're going to proceed with this or not by installing a booth out on the east end of the highway first and then checking it out? Or is it going to be first finish the infrastructure and then install all the different detectors or the transponder receptors or whatever it is going to be? How is it going to work?
Well, this, as the chair referenced earlier, these managed lanes will be operational. The only question is whether or not the RMA will operate them, or whether TxDOT will. So to answer your question, in theory, what's supposed to happen is once the project is complete, the project actually includes the tolling equipment.
Okay.
So it'll all happen at once.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I mean, I think just as a note for our November agenda, we may want to put kind of an update on this project on the agenda and ask TxDOT or possibly Atkins to come in and kind of let us know where things stand and answer some of these questions, because that project is moving and ongoing as we speak.
That's a great idea. We'll do that. And actually, what I had forgotten to mention was because I'm asking for authorization, even though this is not the final document, what I will do is bring back at the next meeting, a red line version to show you exactly what the revisions are that were agreed to. Now, having said that, if there are such significant revisions that they're of material nature, then I will actually bring that back for execution, and I won't actually sign it. So what I'm asking for, what authorization I'm asking for is really authorization to execute these in the event that we can make minor revisions that are to the betterment of the RMA. In the event that they worsen the RMA's position or are of such material substance, then I would bring it back and I would not execute the agreement. So that's the intent. And then also, I think it's a good idea that we ask TxDOT to provide an update to the board in terms of the progress of the project. We can do that as well.
Raymond, at what point do we start our feasibility or our due diligence on the maintenance, the tolling, and so on?
That happens once we sign the work authorization. So the work authorization is signed once the final project development agreement and amended financial assistance agreement are executed between us and TxDOT. So what you're doing is giving me the authorization to sign it. Once we finalize the language with TxDOT and once we both sign it, then I will immediately sign the work authorization with the GEC, and they'll get to work immediately.
You think that'll happen during November, December?
No, actually, much sooner than that. In fact, I think I saw an email go back and forth between our attorneys and TxDOT attorneys late last night. So I'm hoping that they will finalize the language maybe late this week, sometime next week. If that happens, then I'll actually sign, and the GEC, we generally will sign and fax it back and forth to each other so we can have them up and running as soon as next week, more likely the week after that.
I think Pete is chomping at the bit to get to work. Is that correct?
We've been waiting for this for a long time.
Any other questions?
Is this going to set a precedent for our relationship with TxDOT for other managed lane projects, or is this unique to Cesar Chavez?
In my mind, this is unique. This was a situation that came about, if you recall, under the Comprehensive Mobility Plan, the RMA was tasked with developing a number of projects. The first one out of the chute was on Medicas. After that, the Zaragoza and Trans Mountain Northeast and Chavez were all lined up for the RMA to pursue them in exactly the same way. Certain things happened, and we agreed that TxDOT would complete the design and actually the construction on Zaragoza, Trans Mountain Northeast, and Chavez. So it was a unique situation that arose where TxDOT agreed to, if you recall, they agreed to actually cover the design costs and not take them out of the total project cost. So it was a betterment for the community. So I think it was a unique situation. The next projects, as far as I know to date, will be entirely pursued by the RMA. So I think this is unique to this situation.
What's interesting about this project is that, it's part of kind of completing our entire outer loop and giving El Pasoans choices in their mobility. This is one part, but it could be added to other parts to create kind of a system that will basically give the commuters choices as they're on the roads, which will make the project more viable. With that said, is there a resolution authorizing the executive director to execute the instruments as documented in 4A, B, and C?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Item 5, discussion and action on a board resolution selecting the highest qualified proposer to the CRRMA's request for qualifications, seeking a professional auditing service for annual audit requirements, and authorizing the executive director to negotiate and execute an agreement. Mr. Tejas?
Actually, if I could have IT bring up the PowerPoint, and I'll head up to the podium. I developed a very short PowerPoint to hopefully help explain the process to date.
This is very helpful, and this is really kind of the blueprint for everything that we do as we go out for procurement. Just as a heads up, this is basically how we do everything.
Okay, so I'm looking to explain to you all the procurement process that we used for the request for qualifications to provide professional auditing services. So, as background, the board issued a resolution on July 28th that authorized the issuance of a request for qualifications for the selection of a certified professional accounting firm. The intent of the RFQ was to outline the procurement process the RMA would use to select the CPA firm. And this is all intended to bring someone on board to handle our annual audits, which are required by state statute. The RFQ was posted on the RMA website. It was emailed to the RMA email list. It was printed in the Texas Register, printed twice in the El Paso Times, and also provided to the El Paso chapter of the Texas Society of Certified Public Accountants. The timeline is listed as the RFQ issued on July 28th. Questions were received on August 11th. Responses were provided August 18th, and submittals were received on September 1st. 4 interested firms provided a submission in response to the RFQ: Clifton Gunderson, Peña Briones McDaniels and Company, Strickler and Prieto, and White, Samaniego, and Campbell. The RMA, and we'll talk about this under the next item, the RMA developed an evaluation team, which included Tom Cardenas here from El Paso, Katie Neese out of Dallas, and Albert Amos out of Austin. The RMA evaluation criteria, which was within the RFQ and adopted by the board, included 3 areas. We included general overview of firm, which was for 25% of the overall score, experience in professional auditing services, which was 50%, and approach, capacity, and capability of the firm's resources, which was 25%. Using the evaluation criteria established within the RFQ, the evaluation team scored each proposal, which resulted in the following ranking: Clifton Gunderson, Strickler Prieto, White, Samaniego, Campbell, and Peña Briones McDaniels and Company. So, and I've gone through this very quickly, so obviously please stop me with any questions you may have. However, the next steps then is to request a board resolution that recommends that this, or rather that takes the following steps. And it's really 4 things that we're looking for. We're looking to adopt the rankings that were developed by the evaluation team, including the highest qualified firm, which is Clifton Gunderson. looking to authorize the executive director, and this item I think is important as well. And let me take a second here to explain this second item. As you may recall, the state statutes require regional mobility authorities to actually be annually audited each year. Those annual audits must be completed within 120 days from the beginning of a fiscal year to go back for the prior fiscal year. So that means then that we have through the end of this calendar year essentially to complete this audit. So what I'm asking for in this instance is the authority for myself and the chair of the Finance Committee to enter into negotiations with the highest qualified firm. However, under the third bullet, in the event a fair and reasonable price cannot be negotiated, then I'm also asking that you authorize myself and the chair of the Finance Committee to terminate negotiations and pursue negotiations with the next highest qualified firm until an agreement is reached.
And Mr. Marcus is our chair of the Finance Committee, as everyone knows, as the public may not know.
Yes, thank you. And finally, upon completion of successful negotiations, I'm asking for the authorization for the executive director to actually execute the agreement and begin the fiscal year 2011 audit. So those are the 4 actions that I'm requesting.
Any questions?
I have one question, Raymond, and it goes back to, relates to the rankings adopted by the evaluation team. And, I have no problem with them, except the highest ranking firm is from Albuquerque or somewhere in New Mexico. I think Albuquerque.
That's correct.
Typically, when we're auditing, when you have an audit of a city entity with tax money, we should try and find somebody local. So my question is, other than Clifton Gunderson, who's obviously very qualified, were any of the other 3 as qualified or closely qualified as well?
Well, I think the answer to that ultimately is that Clifton Gunderson was unanimously selected by the evaluation team as the highest qualified firm.
Yeah.
Based on the rankings, was there anything in the rankings, and I don't know, but was there anything in the rankings that gave a local firm any additional points or anything just for being local?
I don't believe
No,
that
sir.
was the case.
No, but that's an important point. I'm not aware of any ability for a regional mobility authority to provide local preference. In fact, the only local preference provisions that we found in the statewide statutes relate solely to low bid scenarios, which clearly as professional services we cannot award based on low bid. So I'm not aware of the ability for an RMA to actually provide local preference.
And I like the concept. I just don't believe I don't believe we can do that.
And I don't
in
know.
this
I'm
case.
asking. I know our firm bids audits in New Mexico, and we get awarded audits in New Mexico often. And in fact, we bid against my colleagues that are listed here, all of whom are very qualified. But the only reason a municipality or a government entity in New Mexico would choose us would be because there are no other qualified firms available within the same distance.
Well, now, I would mention that New Mexico actually does have laws on the books that allow them to provide local preference.
Right.
Texas, as far as I know, does not. Now, what we'll do is we'll ask our attorneys to spend some time looking through all the statutes to make sure that that's correct and that we don't have the ability to provide local preference in these scenarios.
We also don't want to discourage the very best from looking at and bidding on our work. Were these the only 4 that responded?
Yes, sir.
Unfortunately, despite all the effort that we made to go out and post it times, our website, through the very CPA, we just didn't get much of a local response other than the 3 entities locally that are on that list. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Well, just a point of fact, to do a government audit, you have to have special qualifications, and you have to have trained staff on board that specifically does government audit
All right.
work. And there are a limited number of firms in El Paso. I mean, it's less than 10, maybe even less than 5 that do it.
Well, I think it would have been great if all 5 would have bid, and but just
One of them is mine, and I can't.
right. Well, it's,
But that would be the only question and the only issue I have with the whole evaluation process.
I can understand that, and this issue was raised in the last meeting about, local versus the not local. biddings and firms and so forth. The only other side of the coin that I would see with the locals is that sometimes you might, it might lend itself to, this is my buddy, this is my friend, this is kind of so I'm not sure. I'm sort of sitting on the fence on.
Well, that's why we also used the GEC, who put together a very capable committee to review this. Mr. Cardenas, matter of fact, is here from ECM, and if he'd like, we can ask him a few questions about kind of what they went through. But as Raymond mentioned, as I understand, it was a unanimous choice. Gunderson stood out and was the choice of all the members, and it's important for us to, to realize that and respect kind of what the advice that we're getting from that particular selection committee.
Right, but, okay, I've got several issues, and Raymond, I'm not going to belabor the point, but the committee had no choice but to make a unanimous recommendation, as I understand it. They're not allowed to dissent. So if it's 2-1, they're not going to come back. They actually coerced a third into voting. So this thing of being unanimous is, for what I was told, the process does not allow for dissent.
Actually, that's not correct. I think
That's not what I was told.
what you're referring to is the consensus style. But what we did was we used the selection process that TxDOT uses, and that's for a number of reasons. But the way that they do it is that the individual scoring team members would actually provide numerical scores for the individual firms. From those scores, it was unanimous that Clifton Gunderson was the highest qualified. Now, what happens after that is that those scores and those team members actually come together to develop what's referred to, I'm sorry, let me back up. Those individual scores are not numeric. They're evaluated, I forget the terminology, but it's like good, very good, meets minimum, that sort of thing. Then from there, you actually go to the consensus, which actually develops the number score. But again, so the point to your question is, the individuals that scored the individual firms, those were all unanimous that Clifton Gunderson was the highest qualified. From there, the team members get together and develop the actual points, which are through a consensus.
So what do they deliver to you, a number, a vote, or a description?
They provided to me what I provided to you all in the backup, which was the scores and a recommendation that we move forward with Clifton Gunderson.
And basically the ranking of the four.
That's correct.
Right.
1 through 4.
All right. The other issue I have is that, by the way, the city, there is, I believe this last session, the legislature allowed for local preference. And I think the city adopted and the county has too, where if it's under $50,000, you can give up to 5% preference. Over $50,000, you can give a 3% preference.
And my understanding that deals with low bid scenarios. Again, this is professional services, so you cannot use that.
And then this is the second RFP we've put out where we've got very poor return. We put out one for our marketing, and we only had one firm respond, and that was the incumbent. So to me, there seems to be a trend that whenever we put RFPs, even though we're trying and we're trying to reach out to everybody, for some reason, the local vendors don't feel like responding. Now, only 3 of them responded on this auditing. One of them was the incumbent. In a city of this size, David, there's got to be more than, including yours, there's 4. You said there's 10.
There's less than 10 that are qualified.
So was that a fair number?
So you might have gotten more than half the people that could do this.
So that's just typical of the response we would have gotten.
I guess we could ask David, what could we do to get more response? Yeah. What is this not attractive to? What can we do to make, in this particular, what could we have done to make this more attractive to have more people bid and other than pay more, which I don't necessarily want to do.
Well, and actually, I don't think the fee was involved in this.
No. It was the price was irrelevant at this point, right? Because it was just for services. And same thing with, after the last bid for the marketing, I asked several of the local agencies in town. They were always saying, hey, when do you guys give us a business? And I said, you didn't reply. So there's either the process or the outreach. There's just something that's not right there.
Well, I think we could probably talk about that basically at another time and try to figure out how we can do that. And certainly I'm open to some ideas as well as Raymond is. I look at what we did here. I look at what we did on the other. And I don't really know what more we could have done at some point. Those firms who are looking to get more business.
But this would be a real concern if there had been some notation that these are the rankings, but they're not good enough, right? I mean, obviously the evaluator said
an example is a panel. There were 2 from out of town and 1 local.
Yes.
Does that have to be that way?
We basically left it
The
up.
committee was 2 from our general engineering, right, according to the.
No, they're all 3 from our general engineering consultant.
Right.
But Tom was the only local guy.
Correct.
So couldn't we have more local people, and aren't there other local partners on that team that could have participated?
We
in
could
this?
have, what I was looking to do was bring the highest qualified, the folks with the most financial background. By way of example, Katie Neese out of Dallas was formerly with the finance team from TxDOT for years and years. I mean, she's got an extensive background in finance. Albert Amos is actually the individual that developed our financing plan for the Americas, which was obviously very technical, very complex, and I felt very comfortable with his understanding of financing. So I went with individuals that I thought would provide us the best evaluations.
And that was the correct course of action. Raymond and I had a long discussion about this, and we went out and asked the GEC to provide individuals that would be properly qualified to provide the best recommendation to us, and then we went out based on the agreements and found the best firm. Well, I wish the best firm would have been an El Paso firm. The best firm's an Albuquerque firm, and at the end of the day, that's what's best for this organization. So Raymond's asking, and I think we should give him the ability to then start negotiating with that firm to handle those
Yeah,
requirements.
I don't have a problem with this award, but I think going forward, like the chairs, maybe we need to sit down and look at the process. And you and I talked about it, so I'm not going to belabor the point.
Well,
that
what I
we're
can
not-
do, what I can do is in the next procurement process that we have, I can bring it to one of the committees and outline who the evaluation team will be, where we're going to post this, the notice. We can outline all of those aspects so that you all have some input in that.
And maybe look at the RFP. Maybe the RFPs aren't conveying what we want to the people out there, and so they're
do
being
that.
turned off.
We'll do that.
And that's fine.
And Raymond, I have no issues with the team. I think they're excellent, and the way you designed it is perfect. My only issue was that we didn't give any local preference, and if we can't, we can't.
Is it because Texas forbids it, or just simply doesn't say anything? Is there a lacuna that there's no?
My understanding is that it's not permitted unless there's a statute that allows for it.
Ah.
Now, again, we'll ask our attorneys to spend some time looking at it and develop a memorandum for us so that I can distribute that to you all. We have a better understanding for the next procurement, but my understanding to date is that we cannot do it.
Oh, okay, because, you could give a percentage weight for that, but if it is not allowed explicitly, then.
Yeah. I'd like to say, I don't have a problem, because, I mean, to Raymond's credit, he didn't have to bring this to the board. This amount is so much, he could have done it on his own. But he wanted it for transparency's sake, and that's why, because transparency, it's hard for me to justify not deeming our auditor for the last 5 years, is it?
3.
3 years, no longer qualified.
Well, it's
Oh,
not,
but
it's
that's
not,
not
it's
what
not
we're
that he's not
saying.
qualified. And, it was the board's decision to put this out for
I
bid.
understand, I understand.
I mean, it was basically our call that basically said we
No, I
need,
understand.
and directed Raymond to do so. So, and, Raymond, I'm frustrated as well, but, this is kind of what we've asked, and,
I know.
this is,
And to that point, I really do want to pick up on that because it's extremely important that we are not saying that they are not qualified. We're simply saying in relation to this specific RFQ that went out and the responses that were provided, those responses are ranked in this order. So the highest qualified in terms of this specific RFQ and their responses is Clifton Gunderson.
And the way-
And absolutely, and I've said since day one.
No, I understand, but
the-
that's
the
not
current-
how it's conveyed. So
I think the incumbent did an excellent job.
Absolutely.
And I was highly satisfied with their work, and I believe you were as well, were you not, David? Absolutely. So this is absolutely no sort of judgment in regards to the quality of work. The quality was excellent.
Just for the record, if we had added 5%, would it have made any difference?
Raymond probably can't answer that.
Well, it's not a price in
You
this
shouldn't.
case. So.
Yeah, and
There's no money.
There is no price involved. Basically, we're going to negotiate. We're going to begin, and we're giving Raymond the ability to go through and begin negotiating. If he can work out the agreed deal with Gunderson, then they'll be selected. If not, then we'll be negotiating with number 2. If that doesn't work, then we'll be negotiating with number 3. And hopefully, we don't have to exhaust all the candidates, that we can find a firm in the 4 that basically were ranked by ECA.
Which brings us to the point, how are you going to know that this is a good price?
Well, we'll use what we've paid over the past.
So it's a
3 years.
historical basis.
But in addition to that, we'll also use market figures, which is why it's important, I think, that we include Mr. Marcus on the negotiation
Yeah, I
team, because that's his area.
Well,
He'll be able to
you
tell me.
know exactly what the standard price is.
It's the best service for the best price. That's what we're looking for.
Right.
And we will negotiate this with that intention.
You know, I'm generally very satisfied with Raymond's work. Of course, I mean it's really very good. But the issue of local versus not local is something that maybe we should get into.
Well, I think as a
At another
board,
time.
perhaps we could have done a better job. This is something that we could have expressed more of a desire on the front end and looked at this prior. I think there's a lesson learned here that Raymond's going to go back and take a look and see what we could have done, if anything. The results are in. It's my recommendation that, we accept the GEC's results and authorize Raymond to begin negotiations.
I move to do that.
Second.
And just for the record, I would ask that it's these 4 items within the final page of the PowerPoint, if that's all right. Actually, just for the record, if you'll allow me, I'm asking that you adopt the rankings developed by the evaluation team, authorize the executive director and the chair of the finance committee to enter into negotiations. In the event a fair and reasonable price cannot be negotiated, authorize the executive director and chair of the finance committee to terminate negotiations and pursue negotiations with the next highest qualified firm until an agreement is reached. And finally, upon execution or completion of successful negotiations, authorize the executive director to execute an agreement and begin the fiscal year 2011.
Do you want a motion for each item or just a single motion?
Just
for
a
all
single
4?
motion, please.
Fine, I move to do that.
And I'll second.
All those in favor?
Right.
All those opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Good job. Tom, thank you for coming today. Appreciate your support as well, and the GEC's work on this as well, Pete. Thank you. Item 6, discussion and action on the Executive Director's Report. 6A, Proposition 12, Bond Project Selection Process Update, and 6B, Supplemental Work Authorization Number 9A, Audit RFQ Evaluation. Mr. Tejas?
Okay, item 6A, Proposition 12 bonds. If you recall, I provided you all with an update at the last meeting that relates to the Proposition 12, what they're referring to as version 2, the bond fundings throughout the state. At that time, the Metropolitan Planning Organization was pursuing a plan whereby the Proposition 12 dollars would be split and leveraged into a program of about $77 million. Our interest in particular with that program was the specific addition of the next direct connector for the Americas interchange at the cost of $23 million. So by way of update, that program was adopted by the NPO, the local NPO, and then was subsequently approved by the Texas Transportation Commission. So what's happened since then is that I've been negotiating with the local TxDOT district in terms of how we would actually complete the next direct connector. Initial discussions have the RMA developing the design for the additional direct connector, with the design then being donated back to TxDOT, and TxDOT would actually pursue the construction and implementation of that next DC. So for purposes of this item, I wanted to let you know that it's been approved at the NPO and Transportation Commission levels, and we are negotiating the various agreements that would have to be amended and actually executed for us to take that next step.
Couple of notes. Our GEC will be, the intention is that our GEC does the design, so Atkins will be doing the design. It's also the intention, as I understand, that America's completion date is scheduled currently. The contract date is January of 2013. So what would happen is the additional direct connector, which is actually number 5, but it's the 4th direct connector, just because it makes it confusing, is so the additional direct connector that will be built will be started immediately after completion of the Americas project. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Just from a timetable and time frame work. So.
And timing is extremely important for these funds, I should mention. TxDOT, and through the legislature, which authorized the issuance of these remaining Proposition 12 bond funds, have required that half of the remaining bond funds be let for projects in the summer of 2012, with the remainder being let in the summer of 2013. So there's a scramble on right now to identify those projects that can be let by the summer of 2012. our project can do that if we use our general engineering consultant to complete the design. And that's why it's so important that we resolve all these issues and bring those amendments and agreements back to you all as quickly as we can, so that we can get our general engineering consultant to complete the design, so that we can actually be awarded these funds. Otherwise, if we'd have to go out for a procurement, we wouldn't make the summer at 12, and the value or the reason why we were awarded these funds, possibly could go away. So that's the importance of it.
And this is the exception, it will not be the norm going forward, right?
Absolutely. Well, because these funds are timed.
I understand.
And-
And hence the reason for this expediency.
Absolutely.
Got it.
And Raymond is also working very closely with Atkins and with AGB, and we're looking to see if there's any way that the Americas can be, the project completion date can be moved up. So we're hopeful that it can, and that would be a great result for everybody. So, but as of right now, it's January 2013. Raymond's got a good handle on the project, as well as our GEC, and we're moving that direction. So, is there any action required on that item?
That's just an update item.
6B, supplemental work authorization number 9A, the audit RFQ evaluation.
Similarly, this is an update as well. If you'll recall, at the last meeting, the board authorized the execution of work authorization number 9 with our general engineering consultant. And really, the intent of that work authorization is to provide the framework for basically an on-call services type of a relationship with the general engineering consultant. What the commitment that I made at the time was that any supplemental work authorizations, which are actually the term, the amounts, the subject matter of those of the actual work, the tasks themselves, I would bring back to the board for your information. So what you see before you now is actually the supplemental work authorization number 9A, which outlines the evaluation team. And this was the supplemental that was used to bring on the general engineering consultant folks to provide the evaluation team for the selection of the auditors. So that's what you see before you here. And that was executed, and the notice to proceed was issued on September 20th so that we could bring the audit evaluations to you today.
And I think that's one of the real values that GEC brings to us, is the ability to, study, whether it be a toll project or help us to evaluate RFPs. I mean, it's a broad scope of services and a pay-as-you-go model without us having a lot of staff and without Raymond handling every aspect and every detail every time. So.
Right, and normally this sort of scenario would have been handled by staff. Since we don't have one. This supplemental work authorization structure that we established is going to be really helpful over the coming years. So this is informational only, unless subject to your question. That's all I have for you today.
Any other questions? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? We are adjourned at 9:49 a.m. Thank you.